I'm Tom Vasel, and welcome to the history of the Dice Tower, or at least as far as 2018. And so we're going to start this history, we're going to do it in different parts. We're going to start this history going all the way back to 1976. Now, I've always tried to make it a point that the Dice Tower is not Tom Vasel, or not just Tom Vasel, myself. It is everybody, hundreds of volunteers. But it kind of started with just me. Well, technically it started with John and Debbie Vasel, who had me in 1976. Now, I don't remember a lot about my childhood, but I want to talk a bit about the different games that I played throughout my childhood, and those, they do kind of stick with me. I think the earliest memories I have of playing game might be the Game of Life, and part of that is the spinner, right, and the mountains, and driving the car, and putting people in, and having kids, and making money at the end. And my dad would never let me put the money on the gambling thing because we don't gamble. And I remember these things, and it's not really that great of a game, but that spinner fascinated me, and it brings me to the point that kids are attracted to these things that look pretty and beautiful and fun and do something cool. And that did do something cool. But I think maybe the earliest strong memory I have of board gaming is probably Monopoly. Can you imagine Monopoly? But my mom was a couponer and did double coupons and refunds and rebates and all that stuff. And she got an anniversary edition of Monopoly, which I thought was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I couldn't believe how many pieces it had. It had metal pieces, that were shaped like different things. And I remember playing Monopoly against my parents, and I remember distinctly crying during the course of the game because I was losing, because all I had were like the railroads, and they had these properties. And then my dad drew that card that said go to a railroad and pay them double, and I came back and won that game. I don't know to this day whether my parents pulled some sort of chicanery and let me win, but at the time when it happened, I was like, wow, what a great moment to think you're losing and come back and win, something I'm still kind of looking to today. So this was kind of the games that I played as a young child. Uno was one that my parents and my brothers and sisters they played night after night after night after night after night. And I wasn't a huge fan of Uno. I just you just play the basic card. But we had fun doing it, and we did it together as a family. Another thing that my parents kind of taught me during this time frame was they're using games kind of as an outreach. We had people over to our house all the time. My parents invited people over from church, especially people who had nowhere else to go. I don't ever remember a single holiday in my house where it was just my family, which it could have been because I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, 5 kids, and yet we still invited over lots of people. When they came over, we played games. I remember many different games during this time frame. Many times I just sat and watched them. The adults would play some sort of party game like Balderdash or something like that. And Pit was one of the highlights where everyone's shouting and trading cards around and smashing the bell and laughing and yelling. And it really showed me just how gaming can make everybody have a fantastic time and a great time together. And not just Pit, but like I said, all these different party games. Balderdash was a strong contender there, but my parents were always bringing all sorts of party games, and everyone really loved them. But I wanted games for me, right? Even though we played games as a family, my mom was busy taking care of the house. My dad was working all the time. And so I wanted games of my own. I think one of the first games that I owned was Guess Who. Now, Guess Who is a very simple deduction game, right? Where you're trying to guess who the hidden person is on the other person's side. But I would sit there and try to think of different ways, and I sat there and would count out the different possibilities of making the other person getting the most bang for your buck. I want a 50-50 chance, not a 5 versus 15 or whatever it was. And I had a lot of fun, but still it kind of got old quickly. I got games like Sorry, which look really cool. We love saying sorry to each other. But none of these games really made me think, ooh, something deep, something strategic. I think the closest to that would be Careers. Now, I'm very happy I still own the exact copy of Careers that we had as a kid. I know I have this copy because my parents actually pasted up this copy and got rid of the Rockstar track on it and made it something else because they didn't want me to want to be a rock star, or the kids anyway. But Careers was a roll and move game, but it gave you alternate victory conditions. I had never seen such a thing before. It let you roll one die, use cards instead of movement. There's all sorts of things. There's still a lot of luck in the game, but this game just was like, wow, something new and different. King's Court was another game we played a lot this time. I wanted to learn like games that I could play against just one of my brothers and sisters. And so guess who was one? King's Court's a checker game. That's another game. These were the two games that when my mom just recently passed away last year, I brought Careers and King's Court back because I had such fond memories of playing both of those with my family and my parents. I think a pivotal moment for me was Stratego though. I got Stratego as a birthday present and I looked at it and there was literally no luck. I mean, I guess there's luck and you don't know where your opponent's stuff is, but you picked your starting setup. You picked where your flag was. You picked where the bombs were. You got, the nines had different movement and everything else. The eights could take out the opponent's bomb. And so I went and played all the kids in the neighborhood. I whooped all of them. And I was like so proud of myself. The best Stratego player around. And then some older gentleman from church played me and whooped me at it. And I was like, oh, guess I'm not so smart after all. And I was like, well, I want to learn. I want to be good. I want to be the best. So small divergent track here. Stratego was one way to be the best. But what's a game you can be the best at? And I saw chess. Now this is the time electronic chess was coming out. Chess was on computers, early computers, but there was a lot of electronic chess out there too, but they're just chess against other people. And I discovered you go to the library and get all kinds of books written about chess and opening moves, and I read them and I practiced and I tried to get better and better at chess. And I would play people who didn't read these books and they would crush me. And I was like, all right, I'm going to get better. And I would slowly get a little bit better. And after a while I thought, man, this is a lot of work for one game. But I'm going to continue and try my hardest. And that's when the second pivotal game, I think, really hit me hard. And that was Scotland Yard. This was for my 13th birthday, I think. Scotland Yard was given to me by my parents. It was my 12th or 13th birthday. They gave it to me, and I just was amazed. There was another game where you had to figure out where someone was. You had to figure something out, like Guess Who. But here, I'm hunting someone down. A bunch of us are hunting the person down. And you're giving clues as to what tickets you take. And oh, we played this to death. None of the kids in the neighborhood had ever seen a game like this. And they asked me to bring it out all the time. And we just had fun playing it over and over and over again. And then the final death knell to chess of sorts, another gentleman in our church gave me a copy of Fortress America. And my mind was just blown. Fortress America had a gazillion plastic pieces in. There were dice you rolled to attack little hover jets and helicopters. And I would sit there and play with them as army men, but I'd make this up. Me and my brother played it over and over and over again. And I would almost always play America, and he would play the invaders. And I would be like, I'm going to stop you this time. I always beat my brother. But, I mean, we would sometimes, I'd try different strategies and look at the lasers, and we were just, wow. My neighbors were like, wow, you have this cool game. And one of my neighbor friends said, I got a game like that too. Because on the inside of the box of Fortress America were two other games, Shogun or Samurai Swords, and the other one was Axis and Allies. Now Axis and Allies is one everyone knows, and my friend said, I got Axis and Allies and brought it out. And I was like, what? Another one of these games with all these pieces? Just blew my mind. So we played Axis and Allies, and he taught us the game. And this is where my rules lawyering came into play, because I would look at the rule book and be like, we're playing this rule wrong. You gave us money to start the game with. Well, we get that money every turn. And the more areas you control, the more money. That fundamentally changes the game. Yeah, my neighbors weren't so keen on me doing this. I think that's one of the first times, probably the last, that I got mooned during the course of a board game. But Axis and Allies, we played this and Fortress America all the times as kids. And then I found out that my other friends, they had games. One came out with a copy of the Eon Cosmic Encounter, which had I known today, I look back at myself and be like, do you realize what you have there? But I was like, what is this thing? And it was a fantastic game. I think it was 10, 20, I don't remember how many races it was. There wasn't many. I remember the Macrons were like, they're overpowered. But not really, because you could only send one at a time. And man, we had fun playing that. But more importantly than playing that, or he also had Kingmaker, was inside these games, there was a catalog. Kingmaker from Avalon Hill. And also for Cosmic Encounter, they were like, you can get expansions. the word expansion for a board game hadn't even entered my vocabulary at that point, but like, wow, you can get more aliens? But then in Kingmaker, that Avalon Hill catalog, I had that thing practically memorized. There were RPGs in there, which sounded interesting. There were sports games. There were war games. I looked into like, what? This war game here, this squad leader war game has maps, and you can change the position of them to get different battlefields. And I was like, does that work? And I looked at the catalog and the roads, and I was like, and it comes with thousands of counters. Wow. And I wanted to know more about this. So at this point, we were pretty close to a thrift store, American Family thrift store. And my mom went there all the time because we had 5 kids. And so we got clothes and everything else from there. And they had a toy section and they had board games. And my mom said to me that I could go there. If I got permission, I could go. It was like 6 blocks away. I'd go there and look at the board games. And I went almost every day to see what new board games they have and then hope I could scrounge up the money to buy them. And I looked for these Avalon Hill games in the catalog. I found a few, Panzer Blitz and Gettysburg and a few others, and I would bring them, buy them, get them, look at the rules, be like, I have no idea what any of this means, but it sounds so cool, and look at the charts and try to figure it out. My neighborhood friends were like, sorry, you kind of passed us here with wanting to play these. But I was so intrigued by all these games that you could get. And then my friend, who had Cosmic Encounter, said, hey, I got this other game, and he brought it out, and it was Hero Quest. Hero Quest. See, I grew up in the 80s. And in the 80s, if you were in that time frame, there was a lot of people who were very opposed to Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons was of the devil, no one could be playing it, and I was kind of in that group. And so I knew that I shouldn't play Dungeons & Dragons. But this game was not called Dungeons & Dragons. It was called Hero Quest. And I figured you should be a hero to be in Hero Quest. So Hero Quest was a game I loved playing. We set it up. We played through it. And then I realized I could be the Dungeon Master. I could sit there and I could draw out maps. I could make new things. I controlled the world. And I loved it. I would sit around and draw up new maps and make new scenarios for my friends. It was so much fun. We played other Avalon Hills during this course of time, but I was getting older and older. I was in my late teens at this point, and we were playing all these games. But then it came time for me to leave the neighborhood kids. Leave them to a point where I've never seen them again, really. I don't know what's happened to any of them, because at this point, I went off to college. And there, I had some major, more dynamic shifts in what I saw in gaming, and we'll talk about that in part 2. But in part 1, before we finish this, I do want to say a big thank you to my parents. You know, my parents, I don't think they're gamers at all, but there's 2 things that they taught me. One is games are fun, right? But the other was share gaming with other people. Like I said, they had people over, and there was always that gaming, and they started me down this path. At this point, I had no idea that gaming was even an option as a career or where it would become in in 2018. But back then, it was just something I loved doing. I didn't watch TV. We didn't have a TV at our house. I didn't play video games. I played them sometimes, not very often, but I played a lot of board games, and that's mostly because of my parents. So, see you next time in part 2, where I talk about what happened when I went to college. It gets crazy. Well, not that way.